This is an oral history project on the Ranks flour mills in Limerick. My name is Emma Barrett and I'll be interviewing David Thompson, one of the first management trainees at the mills. This interview is taking place in Limerick City Hall and the date is April the 8th, 2011. So David, I'll just start by asking you how you became to be employed in the Ranks. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, actually, it was quite a fluke that I joined Ranks, in the way that I intended to do veterinary in college, but ended up changing to agriculture,
Right.
because a friend of my father's lived in Chile, and he had 3 ranches out there and he wanted someone to manage them.
A friend of your father's?
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So I switched to agriculture and started doing Spanish. But then the volcanoes blew in the Andes, and the money became useless. He says, look, you can come out if you want to, but our money isn't worth a hat of crabs.
It'll be on your own accord,
so forget it. So I had a girlfriend here. Now I didn't particularly want to go that far away.
Didn't want to leave the filly.
So Hazel, exactly. So Hazel was one of the attractions to hold me. And I said, look, I look around. I had, as a student, formed a photographic society and got 118 people together, and we went to the States for 2 months, £35 return, probably a record. And in that time that I was going around, I made an awful lot of contacts.
Right.
And they were very, very generous. They all wanted me to go out there and do postgrad work, and stay free in their houses and everything. So I had that option to go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll give myself till Christmas to get a job in
to make
Ireland.
a decision.
Yeah. And I was at a party, actually. It was Paddy Fitzgerald, who was a nutrition salesman. He held a party, and Major Deacon, who was the director of Ranks, was there.
Right.
And we got chatting. And he said, look, you'll have to come and have an interview. We're looking for someone like you as a management trainee.
Just by fluke.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
So I went in and met himself and Peter Greenwood and Maurice Goodbody, who was chairman. Peter Greenwood was the managing director.
And what year was that in now?
That had been 62, sorry.
62.
And I was taken on immediately.
Right.
The following Monday, I joined Ranks.
You made a good first impression, so.
Must have. But it was great. And I joined, as you say, as the first management trainee. A couple of others then later.
And can you remember your first day?
Oh, very much so. I went in and I was introduced to all the managers, right down from the top to the office, to the flour mill, to the feed mill, to the sales manager.
Were you intimidated?
No, I was interested because I hadn't. I was very much agriculturally orientated and scientifically thing, but I wasn't business orientated as such. And so the workings of the whole thing was great, new, and I was enthusiastic and mad to find out all about it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then, 1963, I was basically in each area.
Right.
The flour milling, of course, was the number one thing that Ranks did, and it was great. I swept the floor and then ended up the end of my 2 months there with working with the flour mill manager. So I knew everything all the way through, knew all the staff, knew how everything was made, and I felt I could have run any section of that myself by the time I finished. And similarly then in the animal feed mill, from sweeping the floor to the top, and but the feed mill needed a bit of improvement.
You were kind of part of the nutrition. And
well, that would have been my background, but I hadn't gone. I hadn't sectioned that out. I was generally agricultural. I was a livestock man anyway. I prefer that end of it. So. That meant, of course, going to all the mills. We had mills in Limerick, and Cork, in Dublin, in Clara, and but I didn't go to the Buncrana mill at that stage because they were mainly making porridge up there, and They had a small feed mill mix and so forth.
So were you actually supplied with a company car when you were going around?
No, not at that stage. I had my old banger, a Volkswagen.
But later on you did.
Oh, I did later on. Yeah. Okay. Thank God. I'll tell you about that later.
Right. We'll look forward to hearing that. So.
And then I went to the bakery in Cork and in Dublin, and I can't remember exactly what, but there was a very, very cold spell at some time like that, and literally no bread van got out on the road for a week.
Oh yes, yeah.
And we were sort of completely tied up, and you couldn't get into Wicklow. And so Paddy O'Donoghue, who was the sort of in charge of sales in the Kellys of Kilcock bakery, and he says, "Come on, the two of us will head up into Wicklow and see whether we could break through and give them a bit of food." So we did, and we were slip sliding our way with chains on the wheels and everything, and we went up, and there was a car coming towards us, and he gave out hell. He didn't want us to go on up. It was absolute madness and all the rest, and we said we were going to try because people had nothing to eat. So he went off, and we kept going.
You were the saviour, so coming with the bread.
Exactly. And whatever about the loaves and little fishes.
Yeah, exactly.
But we got there anyway, and we were very gratefully received, I can tell you.
I'd say so.
But coming back that evening then, we saw a car in the ditch and a man out on the road trying to stop us. And who was it but this county council man, chief, who had tried to stop us going up, and his car was in the ditch.
So you weren't ready to help him?
Oh, well, we didn't want to, but we took compassion on him in the end, and we got our chain out and we said, look, we'd pull him out, but we'd make sure he'd remember us. So we pulled his front bumper off in the process.
Well, he remembered you after that, I'd say.
So,
messers.
But the funny thing about Kilcock was, every single person that worked there put at least 10 to 20% of their wages, weekly wages, on horses.
Right.
The betting was only fierce, and Arkle, whatever time I was there, Arkle was my one, and of course Millhouse was theirs. And I'd go out and I'd get great odds on Arkle winning, and I think only once did Millhouse beat Arkle. Arkle won everything. And it helped me, I can tell you, very much, because I had to live in Dublin, and when we were making the dough, you'd have to be down at 1 a.m. And coming backwards and forwards in the old Volkswagen backfiring, and the police used to know me. They'd hear me coming down. So we had very interesting, and I was making the dough, and then all the confectionery and putting nice pictures on cakes and all this sort of thing. It was great. And that was the bakery end of it. And then came down there and worked in the laboratory with Chris Scanlon and his team, which covered everything, feed, everything chemical that you could do. And of course, when we were buying the grain then, all the laboratory had to check the grain and see it for its...
So, you were saying there just about the management training program in ranks. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, basically it was that you went into every section,
right,
and that included the office, and you went from sweeping the floor to the top, going through every bit,
stage.
So that when you did come out, it was a management trainee course. It wasn't that you went off to some school and you learnt how to push a pen. You actually physically had to go out, and I think it was a fantastic program, because you knew
you think it worked well?
Oh God, very well. Very well. And then Major Deacon, who was the Peter Greenwood was the managing director, but Major Deacon was a director in charge of sales and stuff like that. A great golfer he was, too, mad about golf. But he said to me, David, he says, you're very shy, he says, like myself. There's only one way to cure you, get you out on the road. So he fired me out on the road, and I used to wet myself going into customers and everything, on your own, and never met them and so forth. But it trained one to get over it.
But did you enjoy it? You enjoyed
it? Of course. I mean, what's life about?
Exactly, meeting new people.
And so I did relief travelling for all the people taking holidays all over the country, from West Cork to Mayo. I was in Mayo for a long time up there with Pat O'Malley, and in Donegal was Noel Gallagher, and down in Wexford was Heffernan's, and Wexford, Waterford, and of course around Dublin and everywhere. So I got to know the whole country very well. I got to know all the merchants, which was very useful, because later on, when I was in charge of the working of all the animal feed side, I knew all the merchants, and the salesmen in ranks sold to the merchants, and then my team later on sold from the merchants to the farmer, so that they were the farm contact. But so you needed to know the
so yourself, actually, the position that you were in ranks was really giving you a chance to really broaden your horizons, even in Ireland, getting to know a lot of more people, and
exactly.
You know, it wasn't just a job; it was a personal thing as well. Wasn't it?
Was, yeah. And I mean, it was. I know practically every. I was doing about 70,000 a year in miles. Yeah. And they're not kilometres. Yeah. Or as a local man at home calls them kilograms. They were miles. And so I used to have. When I got the company cars, used to wear out fairly quickly. Right. But
so how many did you get a company car every second year? Was it?
No, it was more gone on mileage.
Right. Okay.
That's why I was ahead of the posse.
Depends on the amount of mileage you put off, right?
But then they sent me across the UK to get to know Ranks England. Yeah. And I was out on the road and in the feed things and so forth.
Yeah, and of course
in the offices.
The London was the headquarters.
It was,
yeah.
And then into the feed ingredients side, and I used to go over there to shows in Earl's Court and so forth, where they'd have a stand selling all sorts of things for mixes and so forth. So I got involved in that, and I always remember a salesman there. I can't remember his name today, but we were in Reading, and he parked his car across the entrance to this place where the lorries used to unload. Right. And a big truck driver couldn't get in, so he came in anyway, and he was about 6'6", and this guy was about 4'6", and the lorry driver was giving out to him like hell. So this guy, I can't think of his name, and he jumped up on the counter and he jumped straight into the nose. The man got such a shock.
He wasn't expecting that.
He was not. But that was the scene there. But
so what year was that in, would you say?
That was 64.
64.
And then towards the end of that year I was appointed the first merchandiser ever to hit Ireland. And I was merchandising, the flour was the thing. And I remember one, I think it was Easter, and we were trying to put up flour displays to get people to bake cakes and all the rest of it. And there was one supermarket, and there was a gondola end that I wanted, and it was full of brittle cream. And I said, look, I have to have it. Look, he says, there's a week's brittle cream there. Well, so if I sell the brittle cream, can I have it? You can't, says he. So I went out and I got a big notice, put it outside the door, brittle cream, customers only allowed 1 pot apiece. It was gone that evening.
Go away.
And I had my display in, which just shows, you know, if you create a shortage.
We say that was around 1964.
64, yeah.
So like ranks would have been well established and strong at that time. This was over 10 years before the kind of first doubts.
Absolutely.
Before ranks were kind of rising, wasn't it?
Well, it was. We were still increasing big time. Yeah. And
still on the rise.
Feed side was small at that stage. Yeah. Chick mash was only just heard of. Yeah. Dairy farmers. The yellow meal, as they used to call it, was the feed, and that was just maize.
Yeah, tell us about the various
yellow mail was the thing. So I mean, the chick mash was a breakthrough in that, and then you got pig ration. Everything was fed pig ration. Right. The pig meal, that went to everything. Yellow meal to pig meal, and then you had to have the specialist crowd was the chick mash and so forth. So literally, it was in its infancy at that stage, but it soon changed. You know. But then. I suppose a year later, I was a year on the road with all these with this merchandising thing, which was tremendous, you know, and to this very day I can write placards and things quicker than anyone else and hit them. And in fact, when we have demonstrations on the farming side today, the last 3 has been on the front page of the Irish papers each time, so it has stood by.
Yeah.
But also it gave you a great into the people's minds and how you would get them to buy products, and so forth. And I think probably the biggest problem today is common sense has gone out the window.
Yeah.
And common sense has, if you use that, sit back and think about a thing and come out, take a common sense view, you can very easily come up with the right answer, one that works, put it that way, rather than going into pushing pens and God knows what.
Yeah.
So in the following year then I was appointed the animal nutritionist for the whole group.
So this was in year
65.
65,
yeah.
Right.
And I was basically to develop the animal feed.
Right.
And I had 9 specialist fellows under me to sell from the merchant to the farmer. Yeah. And I suppose I did a bit of training, very quick training. I went over to RHM in Poole, where the animal feed centre was, in Dorset.
In Dorset?
Yeah. And if you have the Dorset cider, if you drink 1-2 pints of that, you'll be doing well. But and then I was up with E.T. Green in Belfast for a number of months, where they were moving fast forward.
Okay.
And a fellow called Jim Beattie above there, and on his thing was he always had one ingredient, which was rape, which you grow and we use in animal feeds, but he always called it love without consent.
Why was that?
All his books had things of love without consent. Jim, what's that? That's rape, man. And then of course I joined into Nottingham University, where they were great in nutrition and everything, and I ended up being on a committee there, and was involved in a whole lot of things. But at that stage Ranks were with a crowd which was a part of Ranks in England called Vitamilo. And Vitamilo made concentrates, as we call them, a mixture of protein, vitamins and minerals, which you just mixed with cereals to make the ration.
Okay.
And they used to make a lot of money. It cost us a lot of money. And I remember they held a big conference in Dublin, and there was a character there, one of our salesmen, and he was there, and this
and
guy,
what was his name? Can you remember?
Oh, I do well, Roach T.
Roach T.
The whole company knew Roach T. But anyway, this fellow from Vitamilo gave the whole day, and great stuff, you see, and he went down around the floor after the meeting, and everybody's saying how great it was and everything. And he came up to my to Major Deacon, who was chairman of the meeting. And he said, Major Deacon asked him what Norman somebody was his name, and he said, Norman, he says, how did they like it? Oh, he says, they absolutely loved it. He said they were all very excited, especially some fellow who had some machine for measuring it. He said it was wonderful. So he says, who was that? I don't know. He said he had a stutter. Oh, Roach T, come up here. So Tommy came up anyway. Yeah, yes, Major, he said. So, Norman here tells me that you have some machine for measuring. Yeah, yes, Major. Well, how does that work? It's a machine for measuring bullshites. So poor old Norman went away with his tail between his legs. But to give people too much of that in an area that they didn't fully understand, I think was a bit above their heads, and I think Roach T was probably right in what he said. So that progressed then anyway, and I learnt all I could from Vitamilo, and then pushed Ranks very hard to give them up.
Right.
And there was absolute war. There was a fellow called Crisp from England. He was sent over to take me out and stop this movement, and they were furious because it was a very big trade for them.
Yeah.
But it was costing us a bomb, and we couldn't make money out of it.
Yeah.
So we broke away eventually. The management backed me, and we broke away, and we sort of went to a vitamin company called Coburn's.
Right.
And they were starting up, and Pressford Kerr and Mike Crehan, who I still see whenever he comes. He married a Limerick woman called Hazel as well, and he comes over.
Hazel is your own wife.
Yeah, and so they were over actually last year, and they came out to see us and everything. So we pushed on from there, and we started developing the whole thing. And Tim Halloran then became the sort of director in charge of the feed side.
Yeah.
So Blue Cross Animal Feeds were what we had, and we used to have stands in all the shows, and Paddy Fitzgerald was the main man he always had the caravan on the back and into every show. And we used to show, and the spring show was a big thing, a full week, and that was a tough one because we used to put on displays, say, of when I first we made the first trout ration ever in Ireland, and we had a pond of trout, and we had to keep the water moving and oxygen in the air. And I remember going in, they lock it up at 12 o'clock at night, and I used to go in over the wall
after hours,
and this night I went in and all the trout were hopping out of the water, and I was an awful way. What had happened? The ESB had stopped, the pumps had stopped, there was no aeration of water. I was an awful way. So I rang up the ESB fellow who was on the stand. I knew where it was, and he came in and he had to hop the wall, and we got it going again. We saved the trout, but we'd lost a good few, and we'd taken them from the place there in Tipperary, and we had to send a car down fast to fill a tank and get more up. But all these things used to happen. We didn't go to bed for the week usually to try and keep everything moving and everything. So it was great. But
so we're still in the 60s now.
Still in the 60s, yeah.
So what about the industrial relations in ranks during the 60s? Was there much? I suppose was there much competition, like with ranks and other co-ops and maybe foreign merchants? Was there much kind of competition?
Well, I suppose when you're working inside, you're so enthusiastic and everything about yourself. You're about your own company. Now, okay, I think our management were probably weaker. I mean, let's face it, ranks to Limerick was the biggest employer.
It was the heart of the city, wasn't it?
It was the heart of the city, and it was big in Cork. It was the only big thing in Clara.
Yeah.
Okay, it was small in Dublin. We had the North City Mills in Dublin, and that was small enough. But I think the management, because flour was such a thing that you had to have it was a base food, the management were inclined to give away, and certainly the performance of some areas was a bit overpaid for lack of work, not as bad as we have today in some of the sections of the community.
And what about the advertising of the company? How did they advertise?
Advertising?
Was it through newspapers? And did you actually have a float in St. Patrick's Day?
Oh, we would. We had floats. And I remember Anne Carey.
Wasn't there a float for the Social Association as well?
There would have been. Yeah. But I remember Anne Carey there. She had a great pair of legs on her.
Did Anne Carey work in ranks as well?
She did.
Anne Carey was the woman we were talking to. Yeah.
And
she was the receptionist, wasn't she?
She was. Yeah. She used to get a high stop on the.
So she would have been fairly young, she would have been in her 20s, would she?
She would. Yeah.
Right.
And George Spillane was there, and he was a great man with the camera.
And what was George's position?
George's position. You have me beaten there.
Don't worry about it. But George was actually organising the Social Association, wasn't he?
He would have been involved in it, yes, very much so.
Yeah.
But being all mills and all areas, I wouldn't have been stuck to one, if you see what I mean. Whereas the ranks, Limerick, were a social association totally
tight
together.
Yeah.
Whereas I'd be in the whole blooming lot of them more than anyone, because I had to.
And do you think that ranks in Limerick you said it's a lot tighter than the ranks that was in Dublin? It was more important to the city, wasn't it? Because it was smaller in Dublin, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was only a pinprick in Dublin, really, And I mean, you just had the mill manager, the sales manager in Dublin with an small office. Whereas here, you were involved in all the various things, and the laboratory was here, and all the centre accounts were all here, you know. And
there was it was a family thing as well. There was generations, wasn't there? And there was families made.
Absolutely. I mean, most people that worked there, their fathers or whatever worked in that mill previously before Rank took over. And I mean, as you know, the Russell Mills and all these sort of things, they were all, and Ranks came on and put the whole lot together, and it was literally, if you worked in Ranks, you know, that was, you were the way you were safe, you know, and nobody could ever think of Ranks going. So
it really was
a bit like a bank.
It really was,
you know.
Yeah.
But it's.
But it was kind of, once you got your job in Ranks, you know, it was kind of a happy environment as well, wasn't it?
Very happy. Yeah.
It was.
I always remember it as happy anyway.
Yeah.
There was never.
Because you know, people sometimes today are kind of working, the way times are gone, they're kind of working in jobs that they kind of only are. They don't really. You're not really happy in them.
Yeah. No.
But it seems to be all good reports.
Well, we were a happy bunch. We were kept busy, and I think management were good. We had our parties, we had our office parties at Christmas. We had all sorts of things. As you say, the advertising was tied in more to the sales side.
Yeah.
And then the sales made a big mistake. They went to put an ad out for dairy cows on my side.
Okay.
And they put a picture of bullocks in it.
Oh God.
So of course, from that day on, no ad could move without coming by me.
Yeah, right.
Because
it
was
it has to be passed by you first.
So so I was involved in,
just to make sure that everything was valid and
so
correct.
Basically, I was involved in the forecasting, in the budgeting, in the market surveys, in the staff training, all the troubleshooting, in the customers, in the formulation of the feed, in the buying of the ingredients, and of course everything to do with the farming and so forth. So.
And do you think there was a good relationship between the management and the workers?
I thought so. I never saw any aggro, because I'd be in a mill and I'd be in the sales. Okay, you'd have other bloody salesmen, they do this, and they're out enjoying themselves in the sun, and we're inside, and vice versa. Then in the winter when there was snow outside, the lads are inside and they're glad to go. You know, that's nice bantering going on, you know.
Good bit
but
of
the parties, the Christmas parties and everything, everybody came in, and
everybody
it was great. So it was a very good atmosphere.
You wouldn't think there was, do you know, like you were saying, at those Christmas parties, there was no kind of a rigid line between the management and the workers. They all kind of.
No, everybody. Then, and the managers' doors were open all the time, you know.
Right. Okay.
And we didn't. Okay, you got an odd one here and there, but without the odd one,
exactly.
the rule wouldn't be there, you know.
Yeah.
So that was the sort of scene at that time. So going on through the 70s, then it was a matter of building up the performance of the feeds.
Right.
And of course the agricultural industry was going. I mean, before we used to have sort of 100 broilers and you'd make enough money.
Yeah.
And it moved on up that you have to have 20,000 broilers to make the same money. So
and is that in comparison to other companies?
No, this would be the farming side.
Right.
So that we had, as the animal feed, we had to come up and produce feeds that were producing better results all the time.
Yeah.
And I can tell you a point there that in nutrition, the pig has the same gut as the human, the same digestive system.
Yeah.
And I'm always having great crack with the human nutritionist people, especially the professor in Cork, in the fact that we get a pig and we put it in a box and we can feed it what we like and we measure everything.
Yeah.
And then we can kill it and we can find out where everything went. And you can't do that with humans. So we therefore know an awful lot more about the digestive system of both the pig and therefore the human than anybody else does. And while these odd human professor will say, "Oh, well, we use the odd pig," we use them all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
so we're getting through the 70s now. Tell me a little bit about some of the problems that the mills kind of faced in the 70s.
Well, you see, it was a big move to go from mixing a concentrate with, say, 3 other things, 2 cereals and a bit of pollard, which came from the mill. You see, we had pollard and bran coming from the flour mill.
Right.
So which is a lovely, good ingredient if it was properly formulated in. And so to move from 3 ingredients to 10 or 15 ingredients, and to mix them all absolutely exactly. I mean, when you look at it, when you're talking about some of the micro minerals, such as cobalt and copper and all those ones, we have to mix them at a rate of less than a gram per ton.
Right.
And it has to be in every sample you take. It's a dust. So you can see how the accuracy, and this is where Peter Green...
It's actually getting harder as the advances move on, it's getting harder,
Exactly. And if the human population, if the pig population was fed the same way as the humans, there would be no pig population, they'd all be dead.
Right, okay.
So, when you look at the performance that we had to have, you had to have the sow producing so many bottoms, and she had to have so much milk for those bottoms, and then she had to go back in pig again very quickly. And the whole thing was how many bottoms you could get from the sow per year that were reared, and then how quickly you could fatten the pig. But fatten is the wrong word, because we didn't want fat, we wanted all muscle. So we had to put in protein with the right amino acids. Protein was 23 amino acids. You had to have the right level of each of the amino acids to produce meat rather than fat.
Yeah.
And of course that's what's wrong with human nutrition today. I could tell you there's 2 very simple steps and it'd stop obesity in the country that's like that.
Yeah.
So, but I worked away, and I had my contacts after my trip around America in Cornell and in Toronto and other universities out there, and I used Coburn's, and I had contacts in Holland, and Dr. Sweep out there and a few of the others. They'd give me all, and I could say, I'm from Ireland, and they'd be mad to give it to me, and it'd be worth a ferocious amount of money, because, and I remember in the UK there, it was the late 70s, I was called over. They were launching a new lot of ration, and I went over, and Lord Rank and Joe and the head of the animal feed division, which is Howard Morgan, that's Ed Welshman, and they came over. Now you see how to produce feeds now, and they were all excited about their thing, and you'll be able to increase your sales and all the rest of it by using our information. I said, I could have 10 years ago. They said, what? Yeah, 10 years ago. I said, you're miles behind us. And so they called up the head nutritionist in ranks, Dr. Backer and Norman, and they agreed that we were at least 10 years ahead. And we were getting broiler results that they wouldn't dream of. And because...
Which is you'd really think would be the opposite way, wouldn't you?
Yeah, well, this is what they knew. They were sure of it. And then when they found we were ahead, they were very small little boys, they were furious. And why didn't they catch up? I'll put it in if you want to. But we had, it was great. But we had to be ahead. Ranks Blue Cross Animal Feeds was the leading feed manufacturer in this country, against Paul and Vincent's, Odlum's, all these other ones came in. Paul and Vincent's were probably one of the old traditional ones, but we went ahead.
Where were they situated?
They were situated in Dublin as their main mill, and then they bought a mill. They bought one in Kilmallock.
Right. Okay.
And but we had this distribution of mills that cut the transport costs. We could move in all directions, and then of course we had the sales force, because the flour sales force was there. They were selling into the merchants, and their costs were divided.
Yeah.
So we had cheaper way of selling, we had cheaper way of transport, and we were on top. And we
you were really more efficient.
We were much more efficient.
Yeah.
And so we were really doing. And then we did take on other products. We took on Ad-F, which was a BP acid to add to silage, and that was a humdinger. We flew. Everybody told us we couldn't do it, and we couldn't this and that and the other.
And
they didn't want it, and we did. And this was there was a difference, I suppose, between my men who were selling from the merchant to the farmer and the salespeople for selling the flour and things to the merchant. And of course, we were always looked upon. We couldn't sell anything. And when we got this new product, of course, it was all through the guys on the feed side. And when this thing went absolutely ripping along, flying, they did everything they could to stop us. Oh, you can't put it on a lorry with the flour and all this sort of thing. But they
didn't stop you in the end.
No. Once we get going,
So you put up a good fight.
But we then got a computer. Yes, I should say we got the first animal feed
actually that's what I want to ask you about. Tell me a bit about that.
That came in.
What year was that in now?
Well, I was just trying to think. It would have been late 60s, early 70s, somewhere around there. It was the first one. It was actually put together by a fellow called Marshall in Belfast.
Right.
And it was an analogue computer.
And were these put in all the ranks around Ireland?
No, only one.
Just in
Measure. And
yourself.
It was about the size of 2 desks, in the form of a desk.
Right.
And you had all your ingredients on a box, a box for each one, with 13 alternative. You had a screwdriver and you twisted it and you read it off on the logarithmic sort of on the galvanometer in front of you, and you put all this in and you fiddled all the things and you came up with the answer, and it was brilliant. But it
must have been expensive.
It was 70,000.
70,000
nowadays.
And where did the money come out of that?
Oh, this was all into the feed. I mean, we were selling an awful lot of food.
I suppose if you're selling an awful lot, then you can.
I mean, we'd have been selling thousands of tons a week, which was terrific.
So there was only one of them, and they were in the ranks.
Well, we had one, and then the man, of course, was selling them, but we had one of the first ones. And I think Odlum's got one, and then. There were a few of them around. I doubt if there are any. I have our one at home.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, I kept it because it would be an antique.
Yeah,
but I mean, when you think now of the little laptop, I mean, it would do hundreds of times more than this thing would do.
Yeah, but sure, in 1960s, as you say,
it was an absolute.
This was a serious device.
Absolutely. And it kept us ahead of the things. And then, of course, I did go out and I went to the World Poultry Congresses in Madrid, and got a lot of information out of that. And actually, there's a fellow there called Tim McCarthy Essie, whose father was the original man in charge of Limerick Harbour.
Okay.
And he was out there, and of course, he was very keen. He was the head of an American stockbroking company, and he used to try and get information on the ingredients and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I remember ending up in a Maharaja's suite overlooking the Real Madrid football ground, and we used to sit there and watch it, and he had a big monitor up with a picture up on the thing, and you could see them all out there. But just very interesting.
We're going to skip back a few years now, or skip on a few years again. We were talking about the 70s. So kind of coming towards the end of the 70s, the ranks kind of started facing some problems.
Yes, you see, I suppose then the reason now, I'd be very unpopular in saying it,
right,
but I think that in England they used to have management trainees, and they'd send them over to Ireland to run the thing here. When Peter Greenwood was managing director, he was in control. He was here for years, and he knew the Irish people, and he lived in Castleconnell, and his family were here and everything, and he was a keen sailor, and he'd be out on the lake.
And what did the workers think of these English trainees coming over to? Were they kind of resentful? Would they preferred an Irish?
Well, put it this way, these people, they hadn't a clue how to manage the Irish people, let alone what they were doing. And they were here to learn, and they were given control. And there were a few of our people there who'd go along, and
so they were kind of learning themselves.
They were learning themselves, and they were practicing various things. And you would get a few people. I mean, there were the genuine person who would stand up and want to stay there and be totally committed to what they were doing. But there were other people there who wanted to see what gains they could make by being very kind to these people. Whereas, I'm afraid I'd be very straight with them. If I thought they were doing wrong, they'd know. At least they knew what the scene was, But and they'd be slowing us down on various things. But some of the decisions that were made were crazy, but exposed.
And did they have anything to do with the closure of the animal feed mill now in 1978?
Well, of course they all would. All the people that were sent over, they would have been I mean, we had, when Greenwood went, then we had a whole ream of them. We had your man, somebody I know him well from he was born in Buenos Aires, and he came over. He was connected. He originally came from Chile, but he was there, and then we had a whole stream of them along the line. And I'm sure they did their best and everything, but they'd never understand us. And then they went off, and they took a big office in Narca Street in Dublin. There was no need for that. We were fine in Limerick.
Yeah.
They just spent money the wrong way. And it was ridiculous, because we were the biggest, we were efficient, and all they did was...
So really you weren't doing anything wrong. It was meant to be a good thing.
It was meant to be a good thing.
But it didn't really work out in the end. Sure, it didn't.
Couldn't they leave things the way they were? And you had the tradition.
There was no problem before they came.
No.
Yeah.
And we were building up on the feed site. It was going a bomb. Everything was shooting up, and we were very, very efficient. And but we used to go across. Then in training along the line, we went to Canterbury, to Poole and Dorset. I remember taking the 9 feed people over there, and there was a fellow called Brigadier Thompson who owned the place we used to stay, and he had a croquet lawn out the front, and the lads, of course, got the mallets and they started playing hurling with them. Oh gee, your man nearly had a fit.
He wasn't
and
happy.
Then we went down to the local pub, and we went to they asked me on the course that we were running, the nutrition people in Poole asked me to ask the first question. I said, look, there's no need to ask me to ask the question. I said, you'll be put up against it. The first thing was a talk on calf rearing. And
calf rearing,
yeah.
Sorry.
And the lads got at them, and they tore them to pieces, that this was only rubbish, that they didn't know what they were talking about, and that just come over to Ireland and we'll show how to rear calves. And then the pig man changed his lecture completely. He was going to give this thing, and he changed it and titled it "My Experiences in Pig Nutrition," which is only his experiences, so we couldn't add. And then we went down to the local pub, and they were all playing dominoes. And one of our guys, Des Ronan, was there. He was our poultry man. He came from Limerick, and he was there, and he'd be fooling around as to where he was going to put the domino piece or whatever it was, and he cleaned them. He took every bob they had. They had to borrow money off the pub owner they didn't know that he was raised in Newcastle-on-Tyne Dominoes Club. And then we took him on and danced, and we weren't there. But however, we upset them a lot. There's one fellow over there called Jeff Wakelin, who was a ferocious man for driving cars, and he got our car. He used to come over here in no time, and he got our car, David O'Keefe's car, who was another management trainee, and he drove it straight up at the office about 80 miles an hour and did a handbrake turn in front of the managing director. So our Super Cortina was banned from there on.
Yeah.
But I went over to him once, and when he was over here, I gave him a bottle of pochine, and he took it over to the pub, his own pub. So he took me down when I was in Kent. And he took me down anyway and introduced me. Hey, he says, you chappie, he says, they burn my counter. And I said, what? Well, he says, you gave them bottle, he says, burning my counter, no place go mad. And he went up and he picked down a bottle of brandy and he gave it to me. Now, you drink that, So we drank it, and we ended up anyway going back and playing rugby with his television set at home. And there was a man with us, and he was a pilot on the Thames, and he got a call in the middle of it. So we all decided to go out and climb up onto this big tanker coming in. Oh, holy God, how we got up there without falling back in the water, I don't know. We ended up in the middle of London on this tanker. But that's all the things that used to happen. And then we used to hold a lot of conferences for farmers, and farm nights. There were about 3 farm nights a week during the winter, and I'd have to do them and be home then, because I had taken over the farm at that stage, and I had to do that and then back in the office by 9 o'clock. So I was one of the lucky people that didn't need sleep. 4 hours was more than enough for me.
4 hours?
Yeah. And but I remember being up in Buncrana one night.
You must have been eating your Weetabix though in the morning, David, right?
Exactly.
A couple of bowls, I'd say.
You need more than Weetabix.
Yeah.
But they went up in Buncrana and we had to give this talk in Malin Head, right down on the seafront over the cliff. And we finished and we came back and we were all taken down. We had to drink this Cuban rum, which was sort of black treacly stuff. And then we drove back to Buncrana at about 4 o'clock in the morning. We were going around this bend and a bloody idiot came out of Buncrana and crashed straight into the side of us. And poor old Jack Rosser, he would die, if a drop of water came in the wrong place, he'd be nervous. He was in a terrible state. And this other guy, he had 2 females with very little on hanging off him, and they were trying to sober him up. And the guards never came out anyway, and eventually we drove away, and the guards called us in the next morning. We had to make statements, and they were absolutely furious because apparently this guy, he'd set up a prostitute line, and he was bringing them in through Donegal illegally, and working them to the weekend and then taking them back. And the guards were furious. It's their own fault. I mean, you had
they
them
weren't
straight.
prepared to come to you at the time.
If they'd come out to us, he'd have got them. But all these sort of things happen along the line, and in a day's work, as they say.
So I'm just going to take you back now. What year was it that you sent the memorandum?
Oh yes, it would have been about 5
exactly
years
now,
about 75, 76, somewhere around there.
And tell me a little bit about that now. Was it 35 pages?
Yeah, 35 full-scale A4s.
And was it handwritten?
It was handwritten, yeah.
So there was blood and sweat gone into it.
I tell you, absolutely. No, I was, things where there was spending in stupid directions. There was inefficiencies. We were losing
and you really just wanted this to be sorted out, and you felt the company would regain.
Well, my thing was the company would go bust if they kept going in that line. And so I sat down, I wrote out all that was wrong, and then I wrote out what I thought should be done. Right. And 35 pages, foolscap pages anyway. I sent it off to Lord Rank.
And did you get a reply?
And what he did was he called all the chiefs over, and he gave out hell to them.
Were they in London? In London, to the headquarters.
Yeah, and he gave them a talking to.
So were these all the chiefs from
Limerick and the directors, really, the working directors?
Right. Okay.
And of course they came back. They should have fired me or something like that. But what I put down was a lot of sense. You see, and they just patted me on the head and said I was biased because I was Limerick, because there was talk at that stage of moving to Cork. They're moving, and of course the feed section moved to Cork in '79. So it was. You see, I was ahead of the posse there, and moving to Cork, in my view, was a bad move for 2 reasons. One, that we had a mill that could easily be converted into a very efficient mill in Limerick. Secondly, to build up a new mill in Cork with 180 degrees of sea behind you, which meant that half your distance was doubled to sell the same amount of ration, because you could only sell it on one side. It just didn't make sense to me. And there were piles of mills down there. There was Eastlips and Jacobs and all these mills, and so why put another one in?
Really, Limerick was working so well that they were kind of creating the problem where it didn't need it.
Well, they were spending a hell of a lot of money in an area that I thought was wrong. Okay, you had the port there, but when you had the Cork traffic to come through, coming out, I mean, the whole thing was madness in my view. But maybe they thought it was. So
then the mills actually closed in 1983.
The whole lot, but the animal feed you see in Limerick closed in 79.
79,
and then went to Cork.
Were people very resentful of the?
No, because the Cork people that were up here were delighted they could go back to Cork. Only my headquarters was in Cork now instead of in Limerick. And how did you feel about that? Well, it was a bloody nuisance, because I had to drive 65 miles every morning, having fed the pigs and everything else.
And at this stage you said you were getting a company car.
Oh God, I was. I got a company car back in when I was merchandising.
But really, you actually needed that, because before you were getting the car, were you being paid for petrol?
Yeah, a bit of petrol mileage, but the old car was falling to bits, and it wasn't good for the company.
Yeah.
But no, when I became a what do you call it, a merchandiser in the end of '64, I got a company car then. Okay. And but it was all Ford cars, and of course we knew the Ford salesmen and everything, because Fords were beside the mill in Cork, and we knew them.
So
we
knew
the lads, we knew them all the way.
So I'm just going to talk about a little bit about closing of the mills. Like, what were the views of the people? What were the views of the management, the workers? Was it very upset? It was a kind of an upset feeling, because it wasn't only a breaking of, like, okay, their work was falling apart, and they were obviously going to be unemployed, but they were losing their friends as well, really, weren't they?
Well, you see, the closing, the first closure was the feed mill in Limerick.
The feed mill, yeah.
Now, the actual closure of that mill, you see, transport and everything else remained, because all they did was pick up the ration in Cork, and still had to be delivered.
Oh, right, okay.
So a lot of the office at that stage had moved to Dublin, into Harcourt Street, which again was crazy, and the accountants and all those people, they were all shifted to Dublin. So Limerick became a sort of a small, as far as employment of the chiefs. I mean, you got all the chiefs, managing director, everybody was in Limerick, and then the whole lot
they were shifted.
They were shifted to Dublin by the English crowd. Well, they preferred to be in Dublin. Anyway.
In Dublin, and why was that they preferred to be in Dublin? Was it easier?
It was easier. They could fly backwards and forwards easier, and they could stay in their hotel or whatever they wanted, and get whatever accommodation. But no, it was a sad day for Limerick when that move started. So
it didn't really happen abruptly. It was kind of people.
It was gradual.
First was the closing of the animal feed.
Well, I'd say the office was on the move before.
The office,
and then the animal feed closed here and went to Cork. And things were winding down along the line, and
so things were kind of gradually.
And then of course with the place having been the headquarters, you lost the status of ranks along the line, and therefore the people weren't as enthusiastic, and they sent in a whole lot of these experts to evaluate the efficiencies and so forth. And of course the animal feed side, I'd be there, and it was very easy for everybody to try and blame me for everything. And I had one of my secretaries was Noreen O'Donnell, and she was great. She'd stand up and give them some stick and told them if anybody else to blame, But she was great. And then Peter Greenwood, when he's left, his secretary, she was very good as well. She came to me, so we had a team there, which and you see. And
really, your roots were how to benefit you were interested in the goodness of the company.
Oh, that's solely it. I remember once there was the buyer was away on holidays. There was a boatload of milo, I think, outside in the sea, and it was going for a very good price. So I said, "Come on, we'll buy it." We bought it. We made £5,000 on it, and I nearly got fired because I took the decision no one else would, just because some stupid apes in an office, you couldn't. They couldn't use their heads.
But you weren't afraid. You weren't afraid to act.
No, and that's why a lot of people, they liked dealing with me because it was straight.
Yeah, but that was how it got done, wasn't it? How it got done properly.
Somebody had to do it.
Yeah.
And decisions had to be made.
Yeah.
And all this pussycatting and arse-licking, if I might use that expression, didn't go down well with me.
So if you were to, what kind of memories do you have of the all good ones, aren't they?
But the characters.
Yeah.
I mean, Roach T, I suppose, would be really number one character. And I remember poor man, he got a bit depressed once, and in my early days, and I had to go up and go selling with him, because by being with him it sort of helped to pull him out of this. I remember being in Longford one day, and in Mullingar, and McHugh was the big supermarket there, and I was talking to him, and Tommy was there, and a fellow came up and tapped him on the shoulder and said, hey, excuse me, could you ever tell me the way to Longford, you see? So he said about this thing about 3 times to Tommy, and Tommy stood there and nothing. So when I finished, I turned to Tommy, why the hell wouldn't you tell the fellow the way to Longford? Did you want me to get a black eye? Which is true, you know.
Yeah.
And but he had things there all the way along the line, and I remember the Dublin sales manager came down to see how Tommy was getting on, because everybody knew Tommy. They'd given the order and everything, and this fellow was Victor Conway, I think was his name, and he was there, and of course Tommy was trying to do the right thing, to go through the list of things. Do you want fattening pig meal? No, Tommy. Do you want sow and bottom ration? No, Tommy. Do you want baby pig meal? No, Tommy. And do you want some chick mash? Yeah, give me 10 bags of that. Do you really want it? You see? So anyway, and the sales manager came out. Now you see, Tommy, the whole thing of going through the list is great. So 10 bags of chick mash there, you see. So Tommy sort of, Jesus, what's this? So about a month later, your man says to him, Tommy, hey, when are you taking back those bags of chick mash?
Right.
I thought I had to get you out of the corner. He says, with that fellow you had around with you. You know, this was a sort of thing with Tommy, but we went out on a lake once. We were fishing. The farmer lent us a boat and told us we needed to. There was fish in the lake to go out, and we didn't catch anything. And we came in. We went into the pub, you know, and they were all slagging Tommy. All we had was a couple of 6-packs.
Yeah. Of beer, I suppose.
Oh, the only fish on the lake was a roach. His name was Roach, you know.
So but he was a good character.
He was a good character, and then you had. Len Mansfield, of course, he was the manager up there. He was Cork, but he was manager in Clara. We had good old memories there. I remember staying in Clara once, and we were at the races in the evening.
Right.
And we went back to the hotel. I banged on the door fairly late. We'd been in Georgie Lynham's and these places, and the next thing, the manageress comes down, her dressing gown, lets me in. And she says, how are you, a gra? She says, look, go in there into the kitchen, there's a fella in there. So I went in anyway. Who was it? And I didn't know for a while. And we decided to have one of everything. 1 steak, 1 kidney, 1 liver. We'd have 1 each of everything. So we had a big fry up anyway. And your man comes out and climbs into his TR3, which was a good sports car in those days. And he says, anytime you're around, call up to the station. He was the local sergeant.
Cool.
And we went up to the station. The hotel owner asked me the next day, look, he says, do you know anything about turf? I said, I do. I said, we sell it by the kish at home. And he says, come on up, we'll go and we'll buy a lorry load. So I went up and I said, by the way, Sean said to call into his station. That's where we go, went in. And I knew bloody well. And he says, do you want a drink? I said, a bloody glass of pochine each. And he says, sir, what poor unfortunate did you take this from? Jeez, I wouldn't take that from anyone. He says, we brew it ourselves. But he was a guy who looked after the law, and everybody respected him. Not any other way, and I can tell you the law around there was 100% kept. Okay. You know?
I'm just going to ask you one more question now, David. It's just, do you know your book that you gave me, 50 Years of Memories?
Oh, yes.
I was just seeing you were the chairman of Limerick County Executive in 1992.
Of IFA, yes.
Of IFA. So do you think that your managerial role in the ranks kind of proved beneficial to you, not only in the IFA but in other things in life? The way you dealt with people, the ranks really did.
It brought me out of my shell. Absolutely and completely, and by having the contacts that you had there, you had a source of information across the board on everything, and it's been really fantastic, because then I became president of the Agricultural Science Association.
Yeah, so it really did. It was
so you got, and that actually clashed with the closing of the mill, which was a bit difficult, and but all the way along the line, you know how to go for things, and also look, you have your ups and downs. It gave you, look, you don't forget about the downs, get on the ups and keep them going, and there's no such word as can't. Go for it. You can do it. If you're mentally prepared to do a thing, you can do it. I remember saying that to a guy, one of the magnet men that can cure people, and I said to him, the strength of the mind is unbelievable. I said, what and I said, you see that chair over there, do you think that if you could put the power of your mind that you could lift that chair up? No problem. The power of the mind is absolutely incredible,
definitely.
and that goes for health, it goes for everything.
Yeah.
And if we could only push that into the right area. But I mean, today, of course, people, I don't know whether you even heard on the radio today about this guy, and he was blatantly coming out there that he was dealing in drugs and he wanted to do that. And well, what did you do? Oh, we got a lot of money. What did you spend the money on? Guns, knives, and drink and drugs. They were the three things. What did you do with the guns? Shoot people, to see. I mean, what sort of thing is society? Look, can't we get together and all work together like we used to in Ranks? But give people a chance to deliver.
So Ranks really was the heart of Limerick City, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And
absolutely.
I'm sure there's an awful lot of people that were sad to see it close, but.
Oh, the whole country. I mean, as well as Limerick was, of course, the key, and they were cute enough. They gradually reduced that.
So, have you any more last anecdotes? I know I'm conscious of the time now. Any small things that you want to add in about Lord Ranks?
Well, there's, I suppose,
or the closing of the mills or anything.
Well, the closing of the mills was just a very sad day. Yeah. I remember, I had to bring a load of furniture over from the UK, and I went to take off the trailer, and I broke my back up, and the doctor had to be called. I was fed morphine, and the phone rang at 8 o'clock to say I had to go to Cork, and Hazel said to me, look, you can't, he's out. And I said he has to come, and so she got the doctor to give me an extra shot of morphine anyway, and off we went. And we got there, and I passed out in Jury's Hotel. I passed out clean on the floor, and I woke up and they were pouring jugs of water on me. So they carried me in anyway.
So you really were dedicated, weren't you? You were.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But we didn't know it was to announce anything, you see, and we went in. They carried me in, and they suddenly turned around and said, look, we're going to close down. And it was an absolute shock to me anyway, and I'm sure to most of us. And I'm afraid I was too much pain to fight. But I did say, look, I sent His Lordship a 35-page report on what should be done, and why the hell didn't you do it? Oh yes, they admitted that the mill would not be closing if they'd followed what I suggested. Which was
but really, David, you gave it 100%.
Absolutely.
Do you know? And I think that people know that you did, and you were a great thing for the Ranks.
Well, I don't know about
you
that.
Were, and I just want to thank you again for meeting me today, and I had a great experience and loved hearing about everything about the Ranks. So I suppose we'll wrap it up for that, because we're on an hour and 2 minutes. So time flies now.
Don't believe it. I know
we could
5 minutes with you.
we could keep talking here now for the day. But just thank you very much.
Well,
I hope you enjoyed the experience.
If I can be of any further help, because at home we have a very old place. It's the oldest inhabited in Ireland, and so I'm very, very interested in archives and history and trying to build up. And I'm saying to people today, and involved in a number of historical societies, to, for God's sake, keep the records. Don't burn everything. And as you're doing here is brilliant, because it'll keep it in 100 years' time. You know, people will say, they'll see a picture of Ranks or something, and
exactly, and those people aren't forgotten. That's the main thing.
No, this is the thing. But I mean, I've big gaps of hundreds of years to try and fill up, and I'm trying to get hold of it, and it's very, very difficult. So it's great to see that.
We'll leave it at that, so David.
Just one little point. I was absolutely amazed when they went to knock the silos, that the person who knocked them should have known that they were meant to withstand any Scud missile from anywhere.
Right.
And because they had a terrible job to try and knock it down. It thought it could knock down with a ball and chain, not the wife, with a physical ball and chain.
But they were meant to
it didn't happen. And then they started blasting the bottom of it, and all it had to do was drop a few feet, and they blasted again. So you know, it really was that when Ranks did a thing, by God, it was never meant to fall. They really put the money in and the equipment and everything. And, it's sad to see it go.
Yeah, it is.
That's all I'd say. It's happy memories.
It is. But at least we're doing our best now to kind of get those memories back and get the lives of the people. So
well done.
Thanks, David.
Holy God. We could do enough for now. Jeez. Thought we were really getting into it. Well, I'm glad I just put those few points down. Those were the 9 people that I had with me at the time.